once again to another telecourse on testing. I'm your host, Fanny de Guzman. The past episodes have all been on the teaching of reading. Today, we will take up the testing of reading. To most classroom teachers, testing of reading still takes the traditional view that testing is the only means to assess how well students can read. This episode, however, will show you that the current developments in testing reading are well beyond this. This episode intends to explore other means through which you can learn more about your students' reading behaviors other than through testing. We shall have more of this when we come back. Welcome back. One of the more current views in the field of student learning evaluation is the shift from simply testing to a broader process called assessment. While testing always involves quantification or measurement of sampled reading behavior, assessment refers to the process of gathering information about learners' needs, their strengths and weaknesses, their achievements, behaviors and practices, their study habits and attitudes toward reading. You can see that testing is just one way through which you can assess the reading ability of your students. You cannot measure all those aspects of reading by testing alone. Let us differentiate the two concepts further. In testing, we usually think of finding out what the learners can do after an instructional event. For instance, after reading a story, you test your students on how well they understand it by asking them comprehension questions. That's all that matters. If they get a high score, it means comprehension is high. If they get a low score, it means little or no comprehension has taken place, and that's it. The test very often is only after the product of the reading process, which is comprehension. We refer to this as product-oriented assessment. Assessment, however, is not limited to knowing the comprehension level of the learners only. We should also be interested in knowing how the learners are able to comprehend the text, if they do, and why not if they aren't able to. We are after the comprehending process. What strategies do they employ to understand the text? What strategies do they use when comprehension bogs down? Questions like this focus on process and not on product. This is another significant aspect of assessment. Assessment, therefore, should take care of both product and process. Traditional testing, therefore, that focuses on testing comprehension is product-oriented. We shall try both approaches in this lesson. Research in reading has shown that the two most essential components of reading comprehension are vocabulary knowledge and understanding the printed material. Our assessment procedures shall try to focus on these two components. How to assess vocabulary knowledge and understanding of printed materials using both product and process-oriented techniques. Let us take testing vocabulary knowledge as a product first. The most common way to test vocabulary is by directly asking the students for the meaning of a word, either given in isolation or in a context, as it appears in a sentence or in a text. In this case, we can make use of selected response item formats like multiple choice or matching techniques. Let's look at these examples. Choose the meaning of the underlined word in its sentence. Tony's classmates, especially the girls, avoid being with him because he's such a drag. The distractors are A liar, B, a show-off, C, a boring person, D, a serious person. Notice that this item uses multiple choice format with 4 distractors. Notice too that the sentence does not provide enough context clues or semantic cues to be able to get the meaning of drag. The distractors cannot also help since they are all negative traits. The item simply expects the learners to give the meaning outright. Here's another example. My brother is such an avid fan of the champion. A close relative. B, an efficient coach. C, a good follower. And D, an enthusiastic admirer. You can see that even if the word is used in a sentence, no definite clues are given. Here's another example where there are absolutely no clues given. To meddle means to blank. A, interfere. B, separate. C, participate. D, coordinate. Notice that this item directly asks for the meaning of the word. It's either the students know or don't know. Now, this time, I'd like to show you how this item can be modified to test the students' ability to identify the meaning of the word using semantic cues or context clues. Watch this. Tony's classmates, especially the girls, avoid being with him because he's such a drag. He wouldn't start any conversation or join in at all. The distractors, a liar, A, B, a show-off, C, a boring person, D, a serious person. What has been added to the stem? Yes, those are semantic cues or context clues. Let's see the other item again. My brother is such an avid fan of the champion that he hangs his big picture right in his bedroom. You can see that the clause that he hangs his picture right in his bedroom provides the clue to understanding the phrase avid fan. This is how we test the vocabulary skill of getting meaning through context clues. This time, let's find out whether students know how to find the meaning of a word using semantic cues. How do we change this item so we can determine what is going on in the minds of the learners? Instead of only asking your students for the meaning of the word, you can ask them to underline the words in the sentence which help them know the meaning of the word. See how the test directions are modified. Underline the word or words in each sentence that tell you the meaning of the underlined word. The students should underline the last sentence like this. If the tests are to be used again, you may ask the students to copy the context clues instead of underlining them. Here's the other item. My brother is such an avid fan of the champion that he hangs his big picture right in his bedroom. The assessment technique to identify the context clues instead of giving the meaning is more process-oriented than product-oriented. Let's move on to another vocabulary skill. You have seen in a previous episode that structural analysis is another technique by which your students can recognize the meaning of a word. To do this, they should be able to identify the base or root word in a given word. We shall not show you anymore how to ask for the meaning of words. They will just be like any other vocabulary word. What's more interesting is to find out if they can apply structural analysis to recognize the meaning of words, or if they know when to apply structural analysis as an effective technique to know the meaning of the word. At the lower levels, part of our vocabulary assessment inventory is knowing whether the learners can identify the base or root word. Test directions can be like this. Underline the base word or root word in each word. 1. Quickly. 2. Wooden. 3. Smarter. 4. Following. 5. Regain. Be sure to give words representing different types and locations of prefixes and suffixes. Another skill to be assessed is just the opposite of the preceding item. This time, the students are asked to underline the prefix or suffix that is added to the word. Watch this. Underline the prefix in its word. 1. Malnutrition. 2. Centimeter. 3. Counterclockwise. 4. Circumnavigate. Let's have another set. Watch the direction. Underline the suffix in its word. 1. Crystallize. 2. Patroness. 3. Planetarium. 4. Biologist. Remember to choose the words according to the level of your students. The reading materials you use in class will be a very good source for your words. For higher levels, sometimes part of the reading assessment is knowing the learner's awareness or consciousness of the strategy that they can use to attack a new word. This is part of their self-monitoring skills, or what we refer to as metacognitive skills. Here's a possible technique. Aside from simply asking for the meaning of the word, you can ask the students to indicate what they will do to find the meaning of a given word. Of course, this is assuming that instruction on semantic use or structural analysis has already been provided. Look at the directions for this sample. Choose the correct meaning of the underlined word in its sentence. Then write the strategy you use to arrive at the meaning of the word. Write semantic use or structural analysis. Strategy here will not be scored. Just be honest with what you use. Example. Lenny has engaged in a number of extracurricular activities. A. Serious. B. Challenging. C. Additional. D. Outside the classroom. Strategy blank. Sometimes it is not advisable to score or give points to the strategy used. It is enough that we obtain information on the learner's strategies for instructional monitoring. It's important to know if they can detect and use the semantic use in the sentence, or if they are not available, to use other strategies like structural analysis. Take note that this is more process-oriented. Up next is assessing comprehension. Don't go away. Welcome back. Another significant object of testing or reading assessment in general is comprehension. Product assessment focuses on how much or how well they comprehend. Process assessment focuses on readers' strategies in comprehending a printed material. As mentioned earlier, testing can very well handle product assessment. This is what I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Perhaps the important point to remember in testing is to consider the levels of comprehension skills in designing or planning a reading test of comprehension. First, it will be good to include items testing literal or factual comprehension. We refer to this as reading the lines. Here are some comprehension skills in this level, an example of an item for each. First, identifying the significant details in a narrative or expository text. Here is an example of a supply type of item. The name of the scientist who first experimented with light is blank. For sure, the answer to this type of item is explicitly given in the text. If you like, you can convert this to a multiple choice item like, the name of the scientist who experimented with light is blank. A. Isaac Newton. B. Thomas Edison. C. Alexander Graham Bell. The second level of comprehension skills is referred to as implicit or interpretative comprehension. It is reading between the lines. The questions require predicting outcomes, interpreting, inferring, drawing conclusions and generalizations, and summarizing. Here's an example of an item for the second level. Why do you think a display of the Northern Lights impresses people so much? The answer to this question or item is not directly given in the text, but is implied only. This is how we can tell whether the item is testing the second level of comprehension. You don't actually see the answer printed in the text. The student should be able to read between the lines. I'm sure you have seen a lot of test questions of this type. The third level is also implicit comprehension, but it is called critical comprehension. It is reading beyond the lines. This is being able to answer questions that call for critical or evaluative responses from the learners. One skill falling under this category is evaluating the actions of the individuals or groups related to the material read. Take this example. Would you have done what the main character did when he discovered the letter? Why? Why not? As you can see, this calls for a personal reactions from your students. You cannot impose a simple correct answer here. You will have to treat this as a supply type of item, like a restricted essay type, and score this using a simple scale as a 3-point scale like this. 2 points. Reasons given are logical and coherent. 1 point. Reasons given lack coherence. Or 0 or no point. Reasons given completely incoherent. Or no response. If you want, you can expand the scoring guide to make it a 5-point or even a 6-point scale. Let's now focus on another aspect of reading assessment, the processes or strategies used by the readers in comprehending the printed material. As mentioned earlier, these are the non-test procedures or the non-traditional techniques. These are what have been stressed quite lately in the field of reading. An assessment of these strategies will give information as to how children think about or monitor their own comprehension. Research shows that one characteristic of good readers is that they know how to monitor their comprehension. They are in control of their devices or strategies. It would then be useful to find out what strategies readers use in comprehending the text. Assessment of these metacognitive strategies is done in various ways. One useful device is a questionnaire response format. Observe the directions used. For each question, choose the one statement that tells the best thing to do before you read a story, book, or content textbook to help you best understand it. 1. Before I begin reading, it's very helpful to A. Summarize the first part of the material. B. Count how many pages are found in the material. C. Make some predictions about what might happen in the material. D. Ask my best friend if the material is easy or hard to understand. Here's another example. Before I begin reading, I should always A. Preview the material, looking at the main headings, subheadings, pictures, diagrams, and tables. B. Make a guess as how long it will take me to read the material. C. See if the material probably will make sense to me. And D. Underline all the hard words in the material. Both items contain strategies which students normally do before reading the text. However, there is a strategy, if practiced well, will help in comprehending the material. In item 1, option C, that is, make some prediction about what might happen in the material, is a good metacognitive strategy. In item 2, option A, that is, previewing the materials, looking at the main headings, subheadings, pictures, and others, is another metacognitive strategy. You can see that this type of assessment will help you identify the students who practice self-monitoring strategies and those who don't before actually starting to read. This time, let's see an example of a question that can be asked while reading the text. Let's read the directions. For its question, choose one statement that tells the best thing that you do while you are reading a story, book, or content textbook to help you best understand it. While I'm reading, it's very helpful to A. Look at how many pages I have left to read. B. Skip the paragraphs that seem too boring. C. See if I can briefly retell what I have learned so far. D. Ask my friend if he or she has read the material. Notice how option C represents the best strategy. A reader uses to monitor how well he's doing in understanding the text. Let's see another example. While I'm reading, it's very helpful to A. See if most of my predictions were right. B. See how many pictures are found in the material. C. Ask my teacher why the material is so hard to read. And D. Think about the main reason for reading the material. Again, option A is a good strategy. If you can monitor what are happening to your predictions, you can tell whether you are comprehending what you are reading. Now, let's go to what the students can do after reading the text to monitor and maybe modify their comprehension. Read with me the directions. For its question, choose the one statement that tells the best thing to help you understand the story or book after you have finished reading it. When I've finished reading, it's very helpful to A. decide if my predictions were mostly correct or incorrect. B. Count how many pages there were in the material. C. See if I liked the pictures in the material. D. Look up the meaning of the difficult words in the dictionary. Option A apparently is the good strategy. If this is not chosen, it will be worthwhile modeling or teaching this strategy. Another format which can be used to identify metacognitive strategies of readers is through a self-reporting or self-appraisal device using a checklist. For instance, the questions earlier given in multiple choice format can be presented this way. 1. Do I make predictions about what might happen in the text? Yes, no. Second, do I preview the material by looking at the headings, subheadings, and graphics before reading? Yes, no. Third, while reading the text, do I see if I can briefly retell what I have learned so far? Yes, no. Fourth, do I see if most of my predictions are right while reading? Yes, no. Fifth, after reading, do I retell all the main points to see if I've understood the material? Yes, no. These are only a few of the questions we can ask about self-monitoring strategies of our students. There are a lot more to add. What is important is that we make them part of our reading assessment. The teachers can model these various strategies so the students can pick them up. Let's watch what may happen to a good reader when he reads.
The Fox and the Crow. The Fox and the Crow. This must be another interesting animal story. The fox, usually in a fable. The fox is always the bad character. He always plays tricks on the other characters. For sure he will try to trick the crow to do something. I wonder how. I better read the story now. Now I know what he's up to. He's flattering the crow to have the piece of meat. He's indeed a very wise guy. Play a trick on the crow. But that's what the crow gets when he's conceited. There's something wrong with the story. Who's really the bad guy? I'll ask my friends who they like better, the fox or the crow.
Did you notice how the boy has monitored his comprehending the story? How the boy thinks does not happen naturally at all. This has to be part of instruction. When you ask the students to verbalize their thoughts while reading, we call this technique think aloud. This is a non-traditional assessment technique to identify the reading strategies students employ. Again, it is assumed that the students have been trained to think aloud by the reading teacher before you use it as an assessment technique. Once they get used to this process, it is easy to detect the strategies they engage in while comprehending the text. Observe that the boy, A, uses prior knowledge when he associates the facts with a bad character. He also makes predictions of what is likely to happen. He confirms his predictions while reading and after reading, and he makes plans after reading. Observe that the reading behavior shown cannot be assessed through testing, but certainly are important to identify through non-traditional assessment techniques. Up next is another approach to testing. I'll be right back. Welcome once again. As you very well know, a regular reading program of the school basically covers 4 skills components: word recognition skills, comprehension skills, study skills, literary skills. So far, we have covered the first 2 components in the earlier segments. This time, let's see how assessment of study skills is carried out. Study skills are quite useful in reading materials, especially in the content areas. They are useful in helping our students comprehend and remember content materials effectively. It would be necessary then to make them both part of instruction and assessment. One group of study skills revolves around selecting information. For the lower grades, this will include using the table of contents and index for locating desired reading material. For the upper grades, this will also call for the use of appendices and glossaries, the use of subheadings, headnotes, and footnotes for selecting additional information, and the use of reference materials like the encyclopedia. To meaningfully assess study skills, it is suggested that you use authentic reading materials like textbooks, reference books, or magazines, and you let students perform or carry out authentic tasks. Here are examples of these tasks. 1. You are interested in the history and civilization of Asian countries. Look at the index of your social studies book on page 250. Note the page where you can read about A. History, B. Civilization. Here's another example. Look at your science magazine using the table of contents. Write the page numbers for A. Letters to the magazine, B. Inventions, C. Discoveries. Another useful study skill that aids students in comprehension is using the dictionary or a thesaurus in selecting the correct definition or synonym of a word. Again, to assess this skill, as it should be for instruction, is to expose the students to the pages of a dictionary or thesaurus and make them select the appropriate synonym or meaning of the word for the given context. Here is an example of a matching item using a dictionary word. Directions. The different meanings of a word are given as they appear in the dictionary. Use them to give the meaning of the word according to how it is used in the sentence. Write the correct number on the blank. Immaculate. Adjective. 1. Spotless, unstained, unsoiled. 2. Innocent, saintly, untouched. 3. Pure, unblemished, sinless. Item 1. Lily looked so immaculate in her white dress. Item 2. Michael is wearing an immaculate shirt during the program. Item 3, Mary, the mother of Jesus, is also called Mary Immaculate. This technique is appropriate for testing the ability to use the dictionary and testing multiple meanings. What you have seen are some study skills under selecting information. Another group is on organizing information. The specific skills here are summarizing, outlining, arranging information according to the right sequence, arranging events according to their chronological order. Again, they're often required in reading content areas. What formats are used to test these skills? For summarizing, which is usually done after reading a narrative text like a story, the students can be asked to write story frames. Here, one option is for the students to fill in blanks with information from the story according to its elements like character, setting, plot, climax, and resolution. The task appears like a sentence completion type. The students will be asked to complete the sentences. Look at the example. Story frame. Character. The most important character of the story is blank. The supporting characters are blank. Setting. The story takes place in blank. Plot. The major problem in the story is blank. Some of the most important events in the story are blank. Up next is another approach in testing reading. I'll be right back. Welcome once again. Now it's time for us to take a look at communicative approach to testing reading. Communicative approach puts emphasis on the student's ability to use reading in order to perform a function or a communicative task. The items or tasks are directly relevant to the ability to use language for real-life communication. For example, instead of testing the comprehension of irrelevant or unimportant details, you can ask your students to extract key information which are useful to them. This satisfies their purpose for reading the text. Communicative tests in reading can make students better realize what reading is for. That is, reading is for learning, and reading is for communication. We read to get informed or to carry out the tasks. So we can also say reading is for information and reading to perform something. But of course, there is reading for literary experience too. What then should you consider in designing a reading test that is communicative? The specifications for a communicative item consider at least 3 key elements. The first one is the text. This is the stimulus material the students will read. Selecting the text is very crucial. It should come from authentic materials which students actually read in and out of the classroom. Here are examples of reading materials students normally read: textbooks, journals, newspapers, magazines, guides, letters, and others. For instance, a newspaper contains news items, editorials, feature articles, advertisements, schedules, announcements, and many more. The second element of a communicative item is tasks. This is the operation the students carry out. It is the tasks which realizes the language function to be performed by the students. There are natural or authentic tasks which are associated with the specific types of tasks. I'll tell you more about this later. The third element is the performance criterion. This is the basis against which the performance of your students is scored or judged. The criterion to be set determines how well they are able to complete the tasks. The nature of the tasks, as well as what you want to focus on in the assessment, spells out what performance criterion to use. Will the task call for accuracy of information? Will it call for clarity of message, appropriateness of expression, or amount of information? You can devise a scoring rubric or guidelines to apply the criterion for describing the performance level. If the performance can be scored dichotomously as simply right or wrong, the scoring procedure will be quite simple. This is the case when accuracy of information is used as the criterion. However, when criterion calls for clarity of message, some form of judgment must take place. Here is where the use of a rating scale may come in handy. You will see how this is applied in the example we shall provide later. Let us go back to the relationship between a reading text and a communicative tasks. We've said there are tasks which are naturally associated with particular texts. For example, you read a news article to get significant information about a current event. You read an editorial to determine the columnist's stand or opinion on an issue. While you may be able to derive information too from an editorial or a column, more importantly, you usually identify the writer's opinion and at the same time react to it by agreeing or disagreeing. These are the authentic communicative tasks for language functions which go with reading an editorial. The type of text, therefore, determines what communicative tasks you will want your students to carry out. You know very well that you often assign your students to read textbooks and other reference materials. What are the usual tasks they are to do? They have to look for definitions of an important concept, supporting details of an event, important findings of an investigation, similarities and differences between two entities, and other academic tasks. Again, these are authentic tasks which go with reading a textbook or a reference material. These examples tell you that you have to consider important, meaningful, and authentic tasks in testing rather than assess discrete reading skills which are often fragmented and irrelevant to real-life situations. Well, in this episode, you have just seen various strategies that can be used in the assessment of reading. Specifically, you have seen that testing, like instruction reading, can either focus on product, as in testing reading comprehension, or can focus on process when you zero in on the student's reading strategies. You have likewise seen how testing reading communicatively can provide more meaning to reading instruction. I hope you will try the testing techniques you have seen in assessing the reading behaviors of your own students. Remember that choosing the right technique is very important in communicating to them what reading instruction is all about. Try them. Again, this is your host, Fanny de Guzman, and I'll be seeing you in the next testing episode, this time on testing writing. Happy testing!